that you want. Now, could you please move on to the Arabic language to follow the presentations in the English language?
الإنجليزية يعني يكفي أن نقرأ على اللغة الإنجليزية و
Those who would like to listen to English, click on English, the button, the English button.
على حسب الاختيار يمكنكم الرجوع إلى القناة التي تودونها لتتبع اللغة المرغوب فيها. الآن سوف ننتقل.
So we'll move now to the language, the Arabic language. All you need to do is click on Arabic, the word Arabic, or the button Arabic.
السلام عليكم. نحن الآن في قناة اللغة العربية يعني نحن الآن في قناة اللغة العربية يعني إذا أردت.
We are now in the Arabic language channel. If I wish to move on to the English channel, all you need to know is to click on interpreting, and choose the language that you need, that is the English language. Welcome to you all. No, the number of participants are 17 participants. We would like to extend our sincerest thanks to the European Training Foundation for having organized this second webinar meeting, which aims to work on e-assessment in education and its efficiency in the educational system. So,
ندعو الجميع إلى الانضمام إلى مجتمع.
We'd like to invite you to this webinar of this training activity launched by the European Training Foundation to encourage teachers and professors to innovate in education and also in what concerns training. So today we have 3 presentations on e-assessment. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you, but we're hearing you fine.
Great. We have Julius Talley, who is responsible for the program of new education. We can give a very short synopsis on this program.
Okay. I think that's an introduction for me.
I believe this is an introduction. Had he?
I'm sorry, Sufyan. I don't want to interrupt you, but I think you have introduced me. I work for the ETF. I'm one of the experts at the ETF who's setting up this community. And the idea of the community is that teachers and trainers and lecturers who are trying to innovate, who are trying to improve teaching and learning, either by using new technologies, by using new methods of teaching and learning, should be able to connect to one another and to be able to share their ideas. We believe that while it's great to, study theory and it's great to hear about new policies, it's also great to speak teacher to teacher, trainer to trainer, so that teachers and trainers can talk about what is really working for them. And they can raise the problems they're having and ask one another for assistance. So we've set up an online community, which is at ETF, and which you can look at, where there is blogs, where there is news of events, where there are research and ideas which are published. But in addition to that, we've got a whole series of webinars. This is let me think about it. This is the second webinar in the series, and there's going to be a couple more next week and the following week, and then there'll be 4 more in November. So there's a whole series of webinars about all sorts of different topics, which we hope you'll join if you're interested in the topic. And we try and do it in different languages. So we try and arrange for interpretation so people can exchange ideas internationally. So I won't say any more. I hope you enjoy the webinar this evening. I hope you learn about new practices, but also I hope you make contact with other people. So please do communicate in the chat. If you want to follow up with someone and talk to them outside of the chat, please do, because we recognize that part of the point of this exercise is to find other teachers and trainers who you might want to exchange ideas with or exchange practices with. So I'll hand back to Sufyan now, and I think he'll introduce the first speaker. Back to you, Sufyan.
Thank you, Julian, for this synopsis on the practice in innovative community and this initiative or the composition of a new education or new training. This is a very important initiative, and we thank a European Training Foundation for this initiative. It is an initiative over many years that aims at promoting the educational and training systems and the educators in particular. Thank you all the participants. And now we are going to deliver or introduce the participants who will take the floor tonight. We'll start with the first presentation, which is a presentation that concerns Professor Amal Farhat. We thank her for having accepted this invitation, and she's an assistant professor at the International Lebanese Universities and also an educational advisor at the Ministry of National Education in Lebanon. And also she is an educational advisor at the Rawafis School. Professor Amal will talk to us today or tonight in her presentation about
التقييم الإلكتروني
e-assessments
هي تحت عنوان
entitled
إشراك
Involvement of Students or Pupils
التشاركي
in Participative Learning
وكل ما يخص
and everything that concerns
الرقمية
digital activities
والتقويمات
in assessments
وكذلك
and also in presenting certain practical models for assessments.
يعني her talk will be engaged okay.
I can't hear you. I'm not sure if you asked me to start or no.
You should start. Yes, you've been invited to start. I don't know why you can't hear.
Yes, okay. I'll share my screen from my side. Okay, good evening, everybody. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I hope you're all doing.
Peace be upon you.
Farhat, I'm speaking from Lebanon. My talk will be about engaging students in collaborative online tasks and authentically assessing their learning. And at the end, I will be showing some practical applications that I tried with my students. So I will try to cover the following points, some assessment challenges, e-assessment challenges, assessment for learning, what we mean by it, interaction during e-assessment, and I'll end with a few sample assessment tasks that I tried in my classrooms. I'll start with this quote: alternative forms of assessment. Forms currently used serve as positive tools in creating schools truly capable of teaching students to think. And here I would like to highlight two points. Alternative forms. What we mean by alternative forms, it's we deviate from the paper and pen assessment types to engage students in other more authentic types of assessments. And I like to stress the word think. So we don't want students only to be assessed for the purpose of the grade. We want assessment to encourage students to become thinkers and creative thinkers, critical thinkers. First, some of the e-assessment challenges. Over the past 2 years, when we had to shift to online learning, we found lots of challenges, and assessment basically was one of the major challenges in online or distance education. Okay. So plagiarism, I think I have a wrong title there. Let me change the title. Okay, challenges. Okay, so plagiarism is one of those challenges. Cheating on tests, also that's a challenge. Authenticity, like were we able to create tasks that are authentic, that resemble real life tasks? Were we able to do that in e-assessment? And being fair to students, that's another challenge. And being objective when assessing students' learning. Now, assessment for learning is important, and are we able to do that in online teaching? When we assess for learning, we need to provide assessment tasks that will provide us information about student learning. It's not to just give a grade. We need to learn about their learning process. And this information, we should be able to use it for making decisions to improve our instruction. And also, students should be able to use this data to improve their performance. So as we see, we need to think of assessment in the framework or with the main mindset as we're trying to improve performance, improve students' outcomes. And we should aim at motivating students. Okay. Now, interaction during online assessment. Basically, this is what happens in synchronous classrooms. Majorly, we see a lot of whole class interaction, like teacher and students. And we see a little of individual work where students are working on their own. The main challenges take place is when we want students to work in pairs or when we want them to work in groups and in teams. Now, some tasks that I engaged my students in and where I had students work in teams or in groups or in pairs during online teaching. I will start with pre-class questions. So before we start on a new topic, I would send the students questions to engage them in, and they would answer them before they come to the synchronous class, to the Zoom meeting. So I would send them a question that is related to the topic we're going to start on. And this gave me a lot of information about what they think of the topic, how much they know about it, maybe where are they lacking, and that would help give me information and to address any special needs I should be highlighted during teaching. So pre-class questions, a very good way to assess what students know about the topic you're going to start with. And post-lesson questions, and usually this come in the form of an exit ticket or an exit slip. So at the end of the lesson, I would send students using Google Slides an exit slip. And these are two samples of some exit slips. And every time I would make sure I would make a little change in the question I would send. So students would reflect on their learning. And that also gives me a lot of information about what they acquired from the session, maybe where they are lacking, maybe where I should re-explain in the following session. And at the end of the exit slip, they would evaluate their feelings. So they would put a tick beside the appropriate statement here. So these are two samples of exit slips using Google Slides. So each student gets his or her own copy. Or an exit ticket. Also, I would put a few questions, very, very broad questions about the lesson. And I would design those exit tickets using Google Forms. Another example of online assessment, when students read an article, and I don't want them to just read it individually and come to class and we have a discussion of it. So I would assign an article or a book chapter. This is for older students. This was for one of the books. We invited the author of the book to the classroom. So before the author came to the class, I assigned each student a chapter of the book. And then students who had the same chapter, they had to meet before class. So let's say all the students who took chapter 1, they had to meet in class and discuss chapter 1. All students who took chapter 2, they met outside of class. They made their own Zoom meeting. They met, they discussed it. Then we invited the author, he came, and students were ready for the book and they were ready to ask deep questions to the author. And at the end, they wrote a report. So as you see, students were engaged in collaborative work before they came to the class. And at the end, they did the report individually. I think that was one of the activities where there was a lot of learning. So when we ask students to work in groups, This is in an online classroom. So when they're asked to work in groups, we must give them very clear instructions on what to do in that group. And usually in the grouping, I send them a Google document and they write their names. Let me show you an example. So they write their names for each group. So all students who had chapter 1, they would write their names, their emails, and the section that they had to read. And when they have their emails, that allows them to communicate, and so on, so forth. So it's very clear on how they're grouped, how they're divided, and I give them the instructions on what to do during the group. And this is another example of instructions, what to do in the group. In your group, agree on a topic, design a web quest, etc., etc. So instructions should be provided in simple language, point form, and straight to the point. And this is another example also on what they had to do in their groups. This is where they had to discuss an article. So I told them you have 3 rounds of discussions. In round 1, this is what you do. In round 2, this is what you do. In round 3. So clear instructions are a key to having good groups. This is an example of group work where students had to construct a project using Google Sites. Google Apps are excellent for group work for students. So they had to construct a project using Google Sites, which is one of Google Apps. And what I asked students to do here is they had to put their contributions. So as each group, let me show you an example. Okay, let's see if this works. I'm just opening the the website that the students constructed in groups. So each group had to do a website or a project on Google Sites. And in the last page, each group had to put their names. Each member had to put his or her name, their email, and tell exactly what they contributed to that project. So this kind of makes them accountable for being honest and for including exactly what they did in the project. Another thing about Google applications is when you have your students working on Google applications is that you can see the version history, and you can see what each student did. So if you click here, it tells you what each student did and how long, the duration of the student's work. So if you want to monitor students' work, it's excellent to have them work on Google applications. So 2 things that are good about that we can do in group work when they're working online is having them work on Google applications. So you get to monitor the time and what they did. And you can ask the students themselves to write what they contributed to that group. This is the final thing that I will be sharing. We can have students do discussion groups. For one of my classes, I created a LinkedIn group where students had to write comments about the lesson that they took, the topic that we studied in class, and they had to comment on each other's posts. And again, here we have to be clear. I told them you need a minimum of 10 comments or discussions and how to submit them. And this created for them like an authentic audience. And that, I think, was what motivated them. Like they have the whole world as their audience, and that's a motivation in itself. But this is for older students over 18 years. With younger students, you would need a more closed and private group. Key points that I would take from what I have said is that we need to create tasks that are authentic for students. and we need to create interaction. We need to give them the opportunity to interact during these tasks. We need to give our students very clear instructions, and we need to be monitoring their work so that we intervene when we need to, and we give guidance. And that's it. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Amal. That's really, really excellent. I mean, if I may say so, I'm really impressed by the extent to which you're using group work, and you're using group work, you know, to give a richness of experiences to the learners and opportunities for them to challenge one another, assess and comment on one another's learning, and to think more deeply about what they're doing and be more active. So I think that's interesting. I think it's interesting, particularly in thinking about, you know, assessment for learning, because I think the group interactions and the peer assessments there are informing the learning of one another. I'm interested a little bit to know about the age of the learners for whom you think these methods work. I suppose some people might think that these methods were appropriate for older, more responsible, more motivated learners, such as, I don't know, undergraduates, but they might not work so well with younger learners. So I'd be interested in your views about that and your experience about that. And I'd also be interested to know about the way that you combine more structured teaching with things like group work. I mean, would you typically, if you were teaching a lesson, have some of it where you were lecturing, where we were transmitting information, and some of it where you were getting them to work in groups, or might you have a whole lesson which was broken up in more dynamic stuff? I'd be interested in how you blend together more structured traditional teaching on the one hand with this more interactive group work on the other.
Okay, thank you very much. As for, I teach at the university level, so some of these projects are for graduate and undergraduate students. But I have tried some of them, I'm also a teacher trainer. So I have tried, let's say, like exit tickets. Mm-hmm. Students have done them at the elementary level and the intermediate. And for teachers that I worked with, also they did exit slips and those exit tickets and exit slips. And we did grouping, worked with younger students also, asking students questions before the lesson also works with any age group. So I think whatever method the work is with students, whether using Google Classroom or even WhatsApp, a teacher can send her students a question ahead of time or after class to see how that works. Grouping works with, I think it works with any age as long as we train the students. It's not going to be very easy. It will be bumpy at the beginning. If it's new for the students. If we train them in a synchronous session on how to work in groups, how to create a meeting, maybe we train them in breakout rooms in a synchronous class, then we can move on to have students do this on their own, but with the teacher's presence. Yani we don't want students to have a meeting on their own without the teacher being there if we're talking below 18. So the teacher has to always be with them. So I think the key is to have clear instructions to train students a lot before we expect them to be able to do these. And even with the university students, it takes some training before we expect them to do that. As for the note on having students write what they contributed, I thought this was interesting because this is one of the challenges in group work, even in a face-to-face class. where a few students end up doing the work and not so many, and the others not doing a lot of it. So I think just asking the students to write each what they contributed, this maybe pushes them to contribute more to the group work. So I believe all of these practices might be tailored to younger students. As for the second question, you asked me about a structured instruction. Yes, there was. At times there is a presentation where I present a lesson, and after that we do a group discussion or a critique or comparing to their personal experience. So there is always that aspect of presenting a lesson as is in the textbook, and then we move on to groups. At times, students, they read beforehand, they come to class, and we just have all this group work. But the structured lessons are integrated in my instruction.
Thank you very much, Amal. I wonder if there are any other questions from the floor. I'd be very interested to hear if the participants this evening who themselves have got experience of running group work online, remotely, or have got a view about whether these exercises could be done with their own classes in their own schools or training centers. Any questions or comments from anyone? I mean, please signal if you'd like to speak. Any comments or questions? Oh, very quiet. Maybe it's quite late, perhaps. Sufyan, shall I hand the parole back to you?
أجل نعم، لذا المشكل ناتج عن الوقت متأخر المناطق العربية.
It's the time, it's late in the Arab region. That's how we can explain it. It's beyond 8 o'clock in the evening when we apologize for this timing, but I would consider it as a timing that's all, because all teachers are present at home, their own homes, and they are not engaged in any other daily activity. That's why you have chosen this timing, this late time. The choice was dictated by this fact. So we have moved to the second presenter, who is facing some technical issues in her joining our platform today. We know if she's there, we'd like to know if she can join us. But there are certain technical issues that she is facing that impedes her joining our platform. There's a problem.
Sufyan, if she can't join us in a minute, maybe we should go to your presentation. And if she can join us a bit later, then we can have her presentation after yours. Otherwise, I think people, you know, it would be difficult if waiting for her to be able to join.
نعم يعني
Yes, surely. Concerning my presentation, it's a processing of the problematic or the problem that electronic assessment faces, more particularly in training and education. My presentation just a set of advices and counseling and certain simple definitions that every teacher needs to take into account and give it attention, more particularly in e-assessment. It revolves around the kinds of assessments there is or there are. Here, we'd like to point out to the fact that there is a set of assessments in assessing learning, and more particularly e-assessment, in comparison, a very simple comparison between classical assessment and e-assessment. There is also the possibility of fighting cheating or plagiarism. How can we go beyond plagiarism and cheating cases in e-assessment, and how we can face some of the assessment system issues. This would bring us undoubtedly to how we can find to find some kind of justice between fairness and reliability. How can we reconcile fairness between all students and all those who intervene in their learning? So we would like to come to some recommendation at the end of this presentation for good, high quality assessment. As an introduction, we can say that classical assessment is a kind of assessment of the students' capacities and capabilities to redo the trainings, to show his trainings, to see if he has understood the trainings or the learnings. This is the simple definition of classical known assessment. In return, there is e-assessment. It is quite simply a turning point of this classical assessment into more electronic devices. The teacher should know how to use IT technologies in assessment and orient them in assessing learners. There's a specificity, a peculiarities in this technique, IT technique, that encounters certain issues and difficulties, such as the internet debit, and also having access to devices, and also a whole set of obstacles that face this technique. Also, cheating or plagiarism in which people or students use this technique, which is e-assessment. I'm going to involve
يعني هنا
here, as you see, it is e-assessment, and it is to be in line with the educational objectives And also the usual classification assessment is a classification that assess any educational or learning objective in accordance with the level that the trainer or teacher needs to assess and define and determine by his or through his assessment is the memorization level and understanding level and the implementation or application level, which is the third level, and the level of analysis and the level of assessment, and the last level is
Sufyan, we can't see your screen. You haven't shared your screen.
Sufyan.
Hey, where is this? Oh, I think I was shut my screen, but okay. سوف أقوم بإعادة تشغيله من جديد.
I will try to rerun it all over again, and I apologize to this for this. There is a problem with the application, the Zoom application, he said.
Well, perhaps Sufyan, you should continue without the presentation, because I think it's better that we continue the presentation than that we wait. So if you're still there, I think you should probably carry on without the presentation.
Well, I think Sufyan is off right now.
Yeah, I think I'll see if I can get it back in.
Yeah, the alternative would be just to someone else to share the presentation.
Sorry, Murad, what did you say?
If the alternative would be to ask someone to send the presentation, and if someone can share it.
Yeah, I was thinking he could do that. Hopefully he'll rejoin us in a second. I think he's back in. Sufyan, have you rejoined us?
أجل عدت أني فقدت الأوديو، يعني لم أستطع تشغيل الفيديو.
I think just stay with.
Turn on the audio.
Just stay with audio. Well, while we're waiting for Sufyan to try and resolve his technical problems, we did have a question earlier from Fawzi Baroud, which we didn't have time for. Fawzi Baroud, are you still there? Would you like to ask your question now while we're waiting for this to be resolved?
Yeah. Good evening. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Yeah, I'm from Beirut, Lebanon.
Ah, welcome.
Yeah, I work at the private university in Lebanon, and I'm the UNESCO OER chair for access and success. You know, I work a lot with open education resources and stuff like that. I had a question to Maha actually, but I guess, I can postpone it till later since now he has the PowerPoint uploaded, I don't want to waste more time, but I can wait till the end, and
No,
ask
please,
my
please,
question.
please, we ask your question now.
No, yeah, I just, like a kind of question, I wanted to know from Maha, from her experience, since, she mentioned she's a trainer too, instructor and a trainer. The case of Lebanon, from what you have seen, with assessment and what are the major problems, which I think it is a problem, worldwide problem. It's not just, to the Lebanese context or Palestinian or whatever. So I just wanted to hear from her. This is one thing. And another point, I'd like to mention, this is a major issue with faculty member, and from my experience, while teaching online, while shifting from face-to-face to shifting online, the assessment was a hot topic all the time. Mm-hmm. So I guess, assessment, especially when we talk about e-assessment, especially online, when we teach online, this is a very critical and very important topic. But, I can just say simply that, most of those problems that we are facing, at least from my experience, is that, faculty member or instructor or trainers, they're shifting their face-to-face regular teaching and evaluation and assessment to the online thing. Here, I would say that we need more than that. We need, to talk about, designing an online course, starting with the design. And, our dear friend, start mentioning things about learning objectives and learning outcomes. And, our faculty member and trainers should be well trained on how to align the assessment with whatever learning objective they have for the course or the training module or whatever. So this is a very important point, the alignment of, the assessment with whatever. And then I would say activities and technology and tough technology is there, thousands of applications that we can use in our teaching and learning, different types, like our friend Amal, presented a couple of tools which are available, but this is not the problem, in my opinion. The problem is with, how to train our faculty member, our trainers, to teach online, to do an e-assessment. For example, because they are used to, we are all teachers, been teaching for so long, we're used to have exam 1, exam 2, exam 3. And this is, she meant, when we talk about learning or assessment of learning. Well, Amal mentioned the assessment for learning, and here people should understand, and this is one major issue, that, the feedback while you are teaching your student, the formative assessment, it's a very important step that it should be taken by those faculty member or instructor who are teaching online. Sorry, maybe I talk too much, but
no,
I think it's
you raise interesting and important challenges. I think you raise important and interesting challenges. Fahad, would you like to respond at all, and then we'll go back to Sufyan.
Amal, you mean?
Sorry, Amal.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you, Fawzi. I think you raised a lot of important points. And it's true, the technology is there. It's been there for quite a while. The tools are there. Everybody knows about them. But what we're lacking is the pedagogy. Teachers don't have the pedagogy for online learning. And I think a lot of effort should go in there. And the curriculum is designed for in-person teaching, not for online teaching. So the activities I presented, they are just a way to compensate for the lack in the curriculum. I believe in the meantime, if teachers understand basic concepts, you mentioned assessment for learning versus assessment of learning. If teachers are able to, let's say, to understand that, the difference between them, then when it comes for them to design assessment tasks, they would be able to design better tasks. But I see that even in in-person teaching, in regular teaching, we still rely on assessment of learning. So if we move to distance learning, it's going to be even worse. So one of the issues I've noticed that is that in instructors at universities, they're still relying on assessing knowledge. Okay, they do a Google form, they send the link to students. The students, they find the answers in the books or on their WhatsApp groups, they share the answers, they send them to each other, or they search for them online, and whoa, we have excellent grades and everybody is doing so well in medicine schools these days. So if we create tasks where students cannot Google the answers, they cannot find them in the books, they cannot send them to each other via WhatsApp, those tasks that are authentic, students need to produce something. They need to use Google in order to produce their own products, their own unique products, and no two groups or no two students will have the same product. And here we would be encouraging students, or we would be assessing their learning, not how they acquired their information or where they acquired it from. Yes, we have a long way to go. I still think we have a long way to go in regular teaching, in these basic concepts, in how to assess, what to assess, how to create these authentic tasks. And once teachers grasp those concepts, they can move them on to online teaching. And yes, the curriculum needs a change, major change, if we're gonna remain in the online text context. Teachers are not curriculum designers, but they can like bridge the gaps. But we need curriculum designers also to pitch in and to contribute to this new shift.
Well, I think
thank you, Omar.
I think that's very interesting, and I think you're right that technology is raising a challenge to our traditional assessment practices, because things that we used to assess are no longer worth assessing. So we can't simply go on in the way we used to, in the way we've been going on in the past, because there's simply no point in asking people to remember things if it's just as easy for them to look them up immediately on Google. I think, though, that there are considerable challenges. I think there are considerable challenges. I mean, I think it's right. There's a big choice of technologies to use. I think that's a very good point. But it's not always easy to know which is the right one. And sometimes when there's many possibilities, that makes it more difficult. If there's only one possibility, you use it. But if there are many different possibilities, that can make it challenging. And I think also that there's the other challenge is how to cope with all the data. It's become relatively easy to collect data, to collect responses from learners, to get scores from them by using digital tests, but to systematically and intelligently use that assessment data, to use it to inform the tasks we set, that's difficult. Not only is it difficult to get it right, but it's difficult to cope with the volume of work. If you've got lots of students and you've got lots of data and you're busy teaching online, to cope with all that data and make sensible use of it is not so easy. So I think it does raise quite a lot of challenges. I'd be interested to know what anyone else in this virtual room thinks of this. Any other comments?
I believe teachers don't need to know a lot of tools. They just need like to know a few tools that they're comfortable with and that work for their purposes.
Okay.
And like I've seen a lot of teachers using Mentimeter, Kahoot, Poll Everywhere, but we're still using them for collecting information about their knowledge. Somehow we need to utilize or manipulate these tools so we address their higher order thinking.
Yeah, thank you, Amal. Well, I guess, I don't know if you're familiar with, but, I would suggest the Pedagogy Wheel, where in this wheel, it's a very interesting thing, just Google it. I will put it in the chat, where, aligning Bloom's taxonomy with Summer model, with all the different types of application, depending on where you are in this wheel. It's called the Pedagogy Wheel. I don't know if you're aware of, Amal. It's very interesting, because maybe he has now around, in this version, around, he mapped around 180 application, different apps, and where to use those apps, at which level, depending on where you are in Bloom's taxonomy, from the lower order thinking to the upper level, higher order thinking.
Yes, it's very interesting. Yes, thank you, Fawzi.
That's useful. Well, please do share that link, because that sounds very useful, and I think it's interesting to to connect together traditional theories of learning with modern technology, so we can read across what we understand to the new possibilities.
Yeah, and they have a version in Arabic too. It is. Yeah, I mean, it has English, French. This wheel. I will share the link in the chat. So,
thank you. Sufyan, are you connected again? I'm not quite sure whether you are or not.
Yes, I'm just within the web right now.
Oh, you've come back on the browser. Wonderful. So would you like to start again with your presentation? Would you like to share your screen? Can you do that, or do you think there'll be problems?
Okay.
John raises an interesting point while we're waiting for Sufyan to upload his presentation. I mean, are you then, John? Are you pessimistic? I mean, do you feel that computers are going to be over controlling, or do you see this as a benefit? I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure that John has heard me. Thank you, Fuzzy. I'm not sure, Sufyan, that we're going to be able to see your presentation.
Sufyan keeps disappearing.
Yeah, no, I don't think he doesn't seem to have got the bandwidth to load up his presentation. I think we're going to have to do without his presentation this evening. He's still with us, but he's not able to actually. Sufyan, maybe you should just talk us through what you've got to say rather than trying to upload it. No, I don't think he can. Ah, well, there's me. Ah.
Let's see here.
No, I don't think that's going to work. Sufyan, I think you should maybe give your presentation without give your talk without your, it's back.
Okay, so What do you see now? Do you see it? Or
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
you see the presenter mode, or
Well, we can see it's not the presentation view. We see the view. You should actually show the slideshow now, because at the minute we're also seeing the the view on your screen. But
okay, so do
okay,
you see it
wonderful,
now?
perfect.
All right. Okay. So sorry, I didn't find the Arabic interpretation. So shall I continue on this English channel?
Please continue. Please continue.
Okay.
Continue in Arabic, please.
اوكي اذا اعتذر على المشكل التقني الذي اعترى المداخله الخاصه بي، وكما كنت اشرح، يعني انا في صدد عمل الفرق بين التقييم الالكتروني والتقييم الكلاسيكي. يعني كنت في الشريحه الأهداف، يعني هنا كما ترون، يعني هناك
The objectives, as you see, this is the classification. Can you hear the English channel? Can you hear the English channel?
وهذا التصنيف هو
This classification, it's
عبارة عن تصنيف
a kind of
يقدم مستوى
that
تدرج
presents the level, progressive level of learning.
ويجب عليكم كمعلمين ومدربين
instructors,
تقييم
teachers and trainers, you need to
متسق مع الهدف، يعني
assess in line with the objective.
يعني عندما نختار
When we choose
تصنيف التذكر على سبيل
the
المثال،
classification of
يجب
memorizations,
تقديم تقييم متسق مع هذا الهدف الذي يقيم التذكر، وإلا سيكون التقييم الذي نقوم بتقديمه دون جدوى، يعني دائما يجب تنسيق التقييم مع الهدف. تعلمون الهدف سواء كان إجرائيا أو عمليا أو إلى غير ذلك من الأهداف، يعني يجب على التقييم أن يكون ملائما لهذا التصنيف. وهنا بعض الأدوات التي تساعد على عمل بعض الاختبارات أو الاستقصاء، أنشطة الاستقصاء، ويمكن استخدام كفورم مثلا. هناك تطبيق كاوت، يعني تطبيق جد معروف. هناك تطبيق سوكراتيف، بيكرز، كويزلايت، فورماتيف، جوسو بوكس. يعني هناك مجموعة من التطبيقات التي تساعد الأستاذ أو المكون على تقديم مجموعة من الأنشطة التفاعلية وتقييمات تفاعلية مع الطلبة، وتقييم التعلمات بشكل سلس وبشكل أدق. هناك بعض أدوات الاستقصاء العامة على سبيل المثال سيرفي مونكي، يعني مجموعة من الأدوات الإلكترونية التي يمكن استخدامها في ما يخص التقويم الإلكتروني، وتساعد بشكل كبير الأستاذ على تقييم تعلمات الطلبة. يعني هنا قبل الخوض في مؤشر التميز يجب التفرقة بين
indicators. We
نوعين
need to distinguish between two
من
kinds
الأنظمة.
of
يعني هناك
systems. There is
نظام ال LMS يعني the Learning Management System وهو
LMS system, Learning Management System, LMS.
يعني هو عبارة عن
It's
منظومة
a kind of
تساعد
system that helps
على إدارة التعلمات، وهي
in the management of
نظام
learnings.
إدارة التعلمات.
The system of managing learnings.
وفيما يخص التقويمات هناك
Concerning
نظام
assessments, there is
معالجة التقويمات
system of
كذلك.
processing assessments.
IMS Assessment Learning Management System Assessment Management System
Assessment Management System.
يعني وهو
تقييم إدارة
عبارة عن النظام الذي يساعدنا على
It's a kind of
عمل
assessing the system that help us do the assessments of high quality.
عندما نقوم أو
When
عندما
we
نستخدم هذا النظام
we use this
هناك
system,
بعض المؤشرات
there are
التي
certain
تخص
indicators
التقويمات.
that concern assessments.
هي
Indicators.
غالبا تكون
These
رياضية
indicators
مبنية
quite
على
often they
معادلة
are
رياضية
mathematical, based on
وتعطينا
mathematical equations, and they
مدى
give us the
اكتساب
extent or the degree
المتعلمين
of
للتعلمات.
learning
يعني
of students,
كل هدف تعليمي قمنا
how they acquire learning acquisition.
بتقويمه.
That is, it's learning that we
نرجع إلى
assist, and then we go back
القائمة المتخصصة
to the list
بالإحصائيات
of statistics, figures,
والمؤشرات
and indicators
تعطينا
to give us
هل الطلبة يعني
if the
بالفعل
students in fact
فهموا
have understood
التعلمات
and
أو لا.
digested
يعني
the
من خلال
learnings or
إجابتهم
not through
نستطيع وبالرجوع
their
إلى
answers
هذا
by
المؤشر
going back to
الذي
this indicator,
يسمى مؤشر التميز
the indicator of
discrimination
distinction.
index أو index of discrimination
or discrimination index.
هو عبارة عن
It's
مؤشر
kind of
يعطينا
index
مدى قدرة
that gives us
الطلبة
the extent of the
على
degree of students
مدى فهمهم
to their degree of understanding
للتعلمات.
of
يعني
learning
يعطينا
what they have learned.
نوعا ما من
It gives us
التصنيف
a
بين
kind of
الطلبة
classification
الذين
between
فهموا
students
المفهوم
who
ووصلوا
have
إلى
understood concepts or the concepts
إلى فهم
and have
التعليمات وإلى فهم
reached the
التعلمات.
learnings, understanding the
وأولئك
learnings,
الذين لم
and those who couldn't
يستطيعوا أن
understand.
نعم. إذن هذا المؤشر هو مؤشر
This index
نجده في
is an index
منصة
that we find
التكوينات يعني
on
منصة
the platform
التعلمات
of learnings
ومنصة
or
التقويمات.
trainings and
وبالرجوع
the
إلى
platforms
هذا
of assessments,
المؤشر
and by going back to
يعطيكم
this index
مدى
we find
مدى تمكن ومدى
the
تمكن
degree of
الطلبة من
students' mastery
التقويمات.
of assessment, he said.
هناك مؤشر آخر نرجع إليه كذلك
index
فيما يخص وهو عبارة مؤشر الصعوبة difficulty index. وهو عبارة عن مؤشر يبرز مدى جودة التكوين أو التقويم الخاص بكم. يعني هل التقويم الذي قمتم بإنجازه هل هو صعب أم لا؟ والأسئلة كذلك هل هي صعبة وما هي الأسئلة التي لم يستطع الطلبة الإجابة عليها؟ وبالرجوع إلى هذا المؤشر الموجود كذلك بمنصات التقويم الإلكترونية يمكن معرفة مدى هل الامتحان الذي قمتم به هل هو صعب
whether the test or the exam you have presented whether it's difficult or not.
يعني هناك مجموعة أيضا من المؤشرات التي تخص الأسئلة متعددة الخيارات.
The multi-choice questions, multiple choice
وهذا
questions.
المؤشر هو خاص مدى
is specific to
المشتتات أو التي نستخدمها في الأسئلة المتعددة الاختيارات.
the multiple choice questions or the options we use in multiple choice questions.
The structure used there.
Or the structures we use in multiple choice questions.
يعني بالرجوع إلى المؤثرات التي نستخدمها في هذه الأسئلة. يمكن كذلك معرفة مدى جودة اختباركم باستخدام الأسئلة المتعددة الخيارات. يعني وبهذا نكون قد حصلنا على تقويم ذي جودة، يعني بالرجوع إلى مؤشر الصعوبة أو مؤشر التميز
يعني distinction or discrimination index.
نعم، أو distractors أو مؤشر يعني وهكذا يعني تكون قد حصلتم على تقويم ذو جودة.
A high quality assessment.
يعني
meaning
وبالرجوع إلى تصنيف بلوم، هناك التصنيف الرقمي لبلوم، يعني كل مستوى من تصنيفات بلوم يمكن استخدام تطبيقات
in which we can use applications.
دي جدوى يعني مرتبطة بهذا التصنيف. يعني ويمكن الاصطلاح عليه كتصنيف بلوم الرقمي.
As Bloom Digital Classification.
يعني ممكن استخدام هذا التصنيف.
Can use this classification.
كفارق يعني بين
as a comparison or contrast.
بين التقويمات دي جودة
high quality assessments, whether these assessments are of high quality or not. إذن
أظن أني قدمت بخلاصة يعني بعض المشاكل التي تعتري التقويم الإلكتروني، وبالإضافة إلى ذلك هناك مشكلة الغش، يعني الغش يكثر في التقويمات الإلكترونية وكطريقة يعني يوجد منصات تقوم بعمل التقييمات أو بعمل مراقبة الامتحانات.
The control of tests or exams, proctoring exams, proctoring or invigilating programs.
وكحل بديل يمكن فقط الاستعانة بمنصة OBS كحل بديل والطلب من الطلبة يعني استخدام كاميرا الهاتف أو كاميرا الحاسوب وكذا، وهكذا يعني يمكن أن تقوموا بضمان أن الامتحانات وظروف الامتحان تمر في جو سلس
in a very good and smooth.
وفيما يخص الأنظمة المعروفة دوليا هناك بروكتوريو، نظام بروكتوريو الذي يقدم هذا النوع من الرقابة أو من التصحيح
or invigilating or grading or marking
التقييمات
of assessments.
وقبل أن ننسى إذن هناك مشكل أيضا
that there is another problem.
The wiseness test يعني
the wiseness test.
يعني هذا الاختبار هو عبارة عن طلبة متفوقين أو طلبة قادرين على كشف الإجابة الصحيحة من خلال فقط عمل دراسة للأجوبة ودراسة للأسئلة، ويمكن بنسبة كبيرة أن يجيبوا عن الأسئلة.
A big percentage of the students can answer these questions.
يعني هؤلاء الطلبة لهم هذه الملاحظة، يعني ممكن أن يجيبوا عن مجموعة من الأسئلة بصفة صحيحة وبصفة تلقائية، وهذا راجع إلى كون أن الأستاذ لم يلتزم بمعايير الجودة ومعايير التقويم. يعني هناك خلل في السؤال أو خلل في مرحلة ما من التقويم، ويستغل الطلبة هذا الخلل ويستخدمون هذا الخلل للإجابة على الأسئلة، وهو عبارة عن ممكن بسهولة أن نتفادى هذا الخلل من خلال احترام قواعد التنظيم أو قواعد عمل اختبار، يعني فيما يخص الأسئلة متعددة الخيارات. هناك بعض القواعد التي يجب احترامها لتفادي هذا النوع من الطلبة. هذا فيما يخص كل ما يخص العملية التقويمية، يعني وبعض المشاكل التي تعتري التقويم الإلكتروني التي يجب الانتباه إليها والعمل على تفاديها في مرحلة الخلق أو عمل التقويمات التعليمية، سواء كانت تقويمات إجمالية أو تقويمات تقويمية أو كذلك التقويمات التشخيصية. يعني لا يهم مدى نوع التقويم، ما يهم هو الالتزام بالقواعد والعمل بالأداة المناسبة التي هي في اتساق تام مع الهدف التعليمي. يعني هكذا يمكن ضمان جودة التقويمات، استخدام الأداة المناسبة لتقويم هدف معين وتعلم معين. يعني هذه المعادلة، الأداة المناسبة المناسب والتقييم المتسق مع الهدف هي عبارة عن معادلة نجاح في أي تقويم إلكتروني.
Sufyan, I think you better draw to a close now, because we're coming to the end and I want a little bit of time at the end for discussion. So can you please bring the presentation to a close now?
Okay, so شكرا لكم. يعني أتمنى أن أكون قد غطيت بعض المشاكل التي تعتري التقييم الإلكتروني وكيف يمكن عمل يعني تقييم إلكتروني ذو جودة. ونترككم الآن مع الأسئلة إذا كانت هناك بعض الأسئلة أو أشياء لم تكن مفهومة في خلال هذه. وشكرا لكم.
Thank you very much, Sufyan, for that presentation. I mean, I think you raised a lot of issues there for us. I noticed that Mahmoud has raised a question which is, I think, a fair one, because I think it's not sufficient to apply the rules. I think, I think the message behind what Mahmoud said is that, we don't always have the right regulations and rules for e-assessment. I mean, they simply don't always exist. And I know that, in some cases, people are having to improvise. They're trying to find solutions where there haven't been. I don't know, Mahmoud, would you like to expand on your question at all? I mean, do you have a point of view behind that? Mahmoud, are you there? Mahmoud? Huamade? Yes, you're there. Would you like to expand in Arabic, of course, if you wish?
Concerning the rules and regulations and instructions in the assessment, we need to limit the issue of cheating or plagiarism. The period examination, you need to control the students. All of these instructions and rules and regulations still missing and lacking in the assessment. In electronic assessment, is it possible to find any in certain institutions or schools that have found any other methods and from which you can benefit? Thank you for your question. Surely, this is a very new field, and e-assessment has become, is now raising the concern of the teachers during this pandemic. There are many companies who are experts in the field of e-assessment, how we can also control exams. Controlling exams is not a new idea. It's old and has been used to a great extent in exam centers and in exam centers in general, and also language exams, diploma exams, yes, TOEFL exams. They use this technique. There are companies now, very well-known ones, such as Procter & Gamble, and so on, and other companies that specialize in this field. There is a team specialized that do the electronic proctoring of exams. That is any attempt at cheating by students. The system of proctoring or assessment controls them. That is any attempt, he can spot them. There are certain systems that rely on artificial intelligence, and there are systems that also rely on the human factor. There's a team that controls the platform. There is a subscription to the platform that is paid by schools and universities, and this team specializes in covering the whole assessment. That is, there are highly developed protection systems of scanning, and also they do a screening of the room to make sure that nobody is using anything illegally to cheat, and also to use a second screen. This in a spontaneous, the system spontaneously can find any attempts of using many screens. The system imposes on you the fact of using only one screen, and also it introduces the ID card and a scanning of the face, and then it gives, and then and only then it gives you the possibility of taking the exam. These are the high developed systems in this regard, and as a solution, a practical solution, there is the OBS platform. It calls for manual cities. You are the ones who bear its brunt or the brunt, and you ask the students to carry out a set of procedures, such as linking their mobile phones or the camera of their mobile phones, link it to another external cameras. And this way you'll find the same environment or context, that is a vision from the sides, from the front. So you use the cameras. All of these can be used and done through very simple tools, and through the use of a free platform such as Waze, without going or resorting to a proctor platform. That's why we need innovation in assessment, and we need new ideas to promote this field.
Thank you.
And
thank you very much. We've come to the end of our time now, Sufyan. So I'm sorry. I'm going to draw a close to that. I think you've raised very, very interesting issues, and so have other contributors this evening. Clearly, there's a lot of technology which is finding out solutions, and I think that's very intriguing and very interesting. Personally, I've got a concern that we'll go back to the system of assessing that which we know how to assess, rather than that which is really important. That in our anxiety to find technical solutions, reliable technical assessment, we will say, well, we have to assess this, we have to assess that, and we won't necessarily be assessing the skills and the know-how and the capabilities, the competencies which are really most important. And that's the challenge I think we face, to have not only sort of technical solutions, but to keep our mind on what's really important. But I think the discussion is going to go on much longer than it can this evening. I'd like to thank everybody for staying awake. I'd like to thank everyone for their contributions, particularly I'd like to thank Amal and Sufyan and our interpreter, Mr. El Gandor. It's been a fascinating evening. I hope we'll have another occasion in the future to talk again, to meet again. We plan to carry on these conversations. Please have a look at our website, the ETF community, and find out what's going on. But I think otherwise I'll wish you a very good night. Thank you, Mirab, for posting the community. Next week, there's another webinar. Mirab, can I just invite you just to say a word about that webinar as a bit of publicity? Mirab.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Next Friday, we're having the webinar about the challenges of COVID pandemic and its impact on the education system, and we'll try to find out if there are any innovative solutions to that in cases from the region. And by the region, I mean Eastern European countries, which are Belarus, Moldova, Ukraine, and Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. But we will already have some participants from other regions, so you're welcome to join. There will be translation to English and from Russian, and to Russian from English. The timing is the same, 1.5 hours. We have a keynote speaker who was the awarded Best Teacher award in Estonia. Mainly in 2020, one of her most of the best achievements was organizing distance learning during the pandemic and finding some solutions to keep it somehow engaging and interesting for students. So, well, it might be not a very innovative topic, but it's still very appealing to many, because in real life, educators are still facing the problems of distance education, proper organization of distance learning, including assessment, of course, and maybe we'll talk about the assessment there as well. So you're all welcome to join. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sufyan, I hand over to you to say good night to everyone. Sufyan, are you still there? Sufyan, would you like to close the meeting?
Thank you, Julian. Sophie. Sufyan, can you close the meeting?
Hello? Do you hear me?
Well,
yes,
I was just inviting you to close the meeting, Sufyan.
Say it, Sufyan.
Okay, so I want to conclude. Okay.
Just to thank everyone and say good night to everyone
Yeah. I was in the other channel.
Oh, I see.
إذن الشكر الموصول لمؤسسة التدريب الأوروبية
European Training Foundation for this
المبادرة تعلم إنشاء تعلم جديد وهذا سلسلة من المحاضرات الرقمية. شكرا لحضوركم وشكرا لدعمكم. المرجو التسجيل بهذا المجتمع الرقمي. قد وضعت الرابط على الشات ويمكنكم
there's like a TV in the background or something. Sorry about that. The interpreter cannot hear properly.
ويمكنكم بالفعل إذن غالبيتكم قد توصلت
Most of you have
بريد إلكتروني يدعوكم إلى الالتحاق بهذا المجتمع.
To join this community.
لذا فالشكر الموصول مرة أخرى لمؤسسة التدريب الأوروبية وننتظركم بكثافة في الأوبن سبيس الخاص بهذا خاص بهذه المبادرة وهذا المجتمع. يعني مشاركة تجاربكم تهمنا وتطلعاتكم.
Is of great importance to us. So are your